Welcome back to another episode of Crown Jewels, a journey through Queen. I'm your host, PLD, on the PLD Projects Network. Good to have you back here. It is an exciting time for Queen fans. I mentioned it last week. We are getting closer and closer to the release of the Miracle box set, which should give us a few more versions to listen to when we get to the 1989 album. But we are not there yet. This week we are on the first non-album B-side that was from the band. We had a couple of non-album tracks during the Queen album, but none of them were released at that time as a B-side. They weren't released until much later on through bonus sessions, bonus tracks of reissues, etc., etc. This was actually released as part of a single back in the day, issued as the B-side of Seven Seas of Rhye. This song is called See What a Fool I've Been. Before we get into it, let's tell you what this show is all about. What are we doing here? Well, we're going through the catalog of Queen and the solo projects as well, and we're going to look at each different versions of each song. We have studio versions, live versions, edited versions, single versions, B-side versions, remixes, everything like that. We figure out which one of these versions of this song is good enough to go on the Ultimate Queen playlist that I am making. One of several, of course. The Ultimate Queen playlist I'm making. I'm also making Ultimate Freddie Mercury, Roger Taylor, Brian Mays. I'm also doing some of the light ones for the casual fans of you, the casual fans. Well, on Spotify, you can find every song that I'm going to put. I'll put it on Spotify. If I choose a version that's not on Spotify, I'll give you an alternate version. How about that? But this week we are doing See What a Fool I've Been, like I said. It was credited as traditional, arranged by Brian May, and that's one of the more interesting things about it, and we're going to get to that soon. First off, I will say musicians are Freddie Mercury on lead vocals and backing vocals. You got Brian May on guitars, John Deacon on bass, and Roger on drums. A very simple, straightforward song, right? This song proves that while they didn't do it quite often, they could easily do the bluesy rock of Led Zeppelin. Even if Freddie's voice in the studio version or the original non-album B-side version are a bit campy. Okay, a lot campy. That's okay. But it's a very bluesy rock tune, just straightforward, something Queen didn't do. And perhaps that's one of the reasons they decided to put it as a B-side rather than on the album proper. Although I have to guess it might be more with the writing credits, which we're still going to get to. I will say this is a long time coming. Brian played this with Smile, and there's actually talk that he might have even played it at first with as early as when he was with 1984, his pre-Smile band. But it was a song that the band did do quite often. He played it live throughout the 70s. Not every concert. A lot of times they would do it during the encore. It was definitely a well-played song. We got a couple of live versions that were officially released. We do have an alternate released version, technically two, but we're only going to listen to one. The band did record this in their second BBC radio session on July 23rd, 1973 at Langham One Studio. We have two special versions of this, and I'm not counting the on-air two different versions, because if you know the on-air deluxe edition the band did, they actually released all the BBC stuff, and then they also released the BBC sessions with DJ Chatter on it. I'm not talking about those. I'm not even mentioned those before, probably, because there's the same track, and it's just DJ talking about it, so I'm not going to add that to a playlist. What I'm talking about, though, is that Brian May did keep the multi-track version of See What a Fool I've Been after they left Langham One Studio, which is something he didn't do for all the rest of them. And it allowed the band, or at least their team and band, to remix a song for the 2011 Island reissue of Queen 2. So there's actually two versions, the BBC session and the BBC Session 2 remix from 2011. The songs themselves are pretty close to identical. Might be some slight differences, but not enough to write home about. But the remaster is the one we're going to listen to, because it does breathe a lot of new life into the track. It's very more in depth. I do think it's a much better version than the BBC 2. I will provide links to both in case you want to hear any differences that you come up with. But for the purpose of this show, I'm just going to kind of eliminate the BBC 2 session and just use the 2011 remix. Well, all right, before we actually listen to it and tackle this track, we will now tackle first the writing credit. Basically, the idea is that Brian May heard a blues band or blues company play a song once. And, of course, there were no recorders in hand those days. There was no YouTube or anything like that. He heard a chord sequence and he heard a couple of lines. So he took that chord sequence and a couple of the lyrics and he worked it up into a new bluesy song that he would play with maybe 1984, but definitely with Smile, and then again with Queen. He wanted to find out who wrote it, but at the time he couldn't. So he basically could only say traditional arranged by May and hope that someone would come forward and so that he could credit him. To go further, this is the actual quote from Brian May on his soapbox from 2004. He said, "A good thing just happened to me, something which will enable me to give something back, good for my karma. Ever since I used to play See What a Fool I've Been in the early days of Queen, I knew that I had borrowed the idea for the song from a performance I had seen on TV of a visiting blues company, which I remembered included Big Bill Broonzy and Muddy Waters, Matt Murphy, and others. I only heard the song once, since there were no recorders to hand in those days, at least not where I lived. What I remembered was just a chord sequence and a couple of lines. I worked it up into a song, actually for Smile before Queen, and as a way for me to pursue an idea of using huge dynamics in a bluesy song to make it cut across heavy, if you know what I mean. It was one of the ingredients of the dreams of Queen in the early days. When I come around to doing the label for the song, we used a very rough take of it for an early B-side. I could only put for the composer credit traditional arranged May because I didn't know who had done the song which inspired me. I always said I would eventually find out who the missing author was and credit him. Well, it was much harder than I thought. I looked in all the places I could think of, and many people had tried to find the song since then, but without success. I was beginning to think I had dreamed the whole thing. We're talking about 30 years or more. But this week I received a letter from Patrick Lemieux in Toronto, who had been corresponding with Greg Brooks, our archivist, with the news that he had found the track which matched up. It was a long search. The song had not appeared in any regular compilation, and Patrick had only found a clue when searching through lyrics on the internet. The song was recorded only on one limited edition collection of songs of Big Bill Broonzy and Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, under the title of That's How I Feel. There it was. I finally received the copy Mr. Lemieux found for me this week, and it is the boy. Big thanks to him. It's a thrill. The song is actually very moving, has a train of thought very impassioned and real, and sounds as fresh as the day it was put down. I got the timing a bit wrong really in my own rendition, but the format is pretty close. Now I can take steps to get in touch and give them the credit and the writing royalties too. I hope they're still around to enjoy them. I'll keep you all posted. From what I can recall later, I don't have the quote on hand. I do believe he did find the families and was able to give them at least some royalties for it, and it was good to see it all work out. And for your listening pleasure, I did put the link in the description of the That's How I Feel from Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and so you can listen to it on your own volition. But now that we're done with that, we're done with the notes and quotes, as I call them, let's get into the original version, the non-album B-side that was released on 7 Seas of Rye. See what a fool I've been. Well, there you have it. That is the B-side version of See What a Fool I've Been. As you can hear now, what I joked about before, it's a very campy vocal from Freddie, which I have to be honest, it kind of takes away from the song a bit. I don't know if he did it as a counter to like the hyper-masculine, like Led Zeppelin vocals or the other bluesy rock bands of the time. It's still a great vocal overall, some great notes in there, some great power. However, I do feel it's a detriment to do it as campy as he did. As you're going to find out in the other versions, he does it more straightforward. And while the argument against that would be it sounds less like Queen and more like a blues rock band, I could see that argument. I still feel that for the song, it works better. The musical is very atypical of Queen, especially in this version. It's a bit of that old, like, sloppy blues playing, which Queen is not known for. Queen is obviously known for being very intricate, very methodical with their pieces. They do kind of let this one ride a bit, and it's for the best for the song. That actually is for the good of the song, I feel. I do think Brian does add some choice guitar notes alongside Fred Diggs' descending vocals at time. The "Sit there, candle," and he has the guitar playing along with it. It is a great moment in the song. It's one of my favorite moments in the song. It's just a great back and forth, and Brian doing the counter melody thing that he does. Now, this thing is not really counter melody, but playing that counter part to Freddie in a way. It fills it out like a voice would. There's no other like really big vocals in here, just Freddie's voice. So Brian's guitar fills in what would be a void in the Queen side of things, so to speak. Guitar does have some great noodling going on. The middle jam session comes into play in the middle section with the solo, and that features John Deacon really playing that bass. I love his bass work in the middle section. Really kind of moving around, a lot of notes, like a lot of fret playing, and it goes down a little bit. It's a great piece of work from John there. Got some more panning guitar from Brian going from one side of the stereo to the other. The vocals are decent at this point. Again, the campiness does affect it here and there. But then it goes back to a little bit of vocals, and then we go back to this outro work with more of a jam session. Roger getting more and more frenetic as the song goes on. It ends as it should. It does feel a little rough, but overall it's a great thing because you don't see Queen doing this kind of song very often, which is nice. The only problem is that it's not as good as some of the other stuff they do. The live versions and the BBC version, I feel, are better. I always spoil myself early. I should save that for the end when I start ranking it. But it's easy to say that I do like every other version pretty much better. This is probably the least one I would put on. So without further ado, let's get to that next one. Let's get to that BBC version. Again, I have both in the description below me, both the one that's on air, which is the original BBC session, and then I also have the 2011 version. If you want to listen to both, listen to both. I'm going to talk more about the 2011 version, though, specifically, because I'm not going to include the original BBC on the rankings. So without further ado, BBC time.
Oh, Lord, I say, what a fool I've been.
Well, there you go. That's night and day right there. That's night and day, really, honestly. If you did listen to the original BBC version and then you listen to the 2011 remix, you could really tell the instruments are so vivid in the remix compared to the rougher mix of the original BBC version. And of course, the Freddie vocal far more straightforward. And we do get some slight differences in the lyrics. It is closer to what you'd hear from the band live. I think that Freddie had just as much fun here, despite not going for his campy side. A lot of screams, a lot of ows and yows and yows, the kind of thing that he throws in there. It seems like it does feel like a very live version. I mean, you are live at the BBC; it's in the studio, but Freddie plays it off like there's an audience, really hamming it up for the crew in a way. It's funny, I'm saying hamming it up for this one when he's really hamming it up for the original, not album B-side. But this one feels more like it fits the song better than the original vocal, like I said. Some other great things in the BBC version. Roger's drums are far crisper, and you can hear them crystal clear. They don't sound muddy at all, whereas it kind of got a little sloppy in the original version. Brian's guitars are also finally more crystal clear, and we have great sessions during the mid section and the outro jam, where Brian's guitars are playing so many different things on each different side of the stereo, but it never really fully slips into chaos. It really plays well off each other, gives each other room to breathe. And one's kind of like moving around a lot, the other one's kind of doing something kind of more subtle. And then it switches to where this one's noodling on the left-hand side, while the other one's a little more subtle. But they're still playing the different parts, and they're complementary of each other. It's impressive. It's really impressive. I really enjoy it. I will say the ending of this one's much better with the nice Roger little drum solo type thing ending. Freddie, ow, at the end. I love this version. I think it's a great version. It's a great track. But let's see if the live version can hold up to it. As we listen to two, we got one from March of 1974 at the Rainbow, one from December of 1975 from the Night at the Odeon. So let's go right first. Rainbow, March 1974.
Well, she's gone.
And there you have it. Much like the BBC version, to be honest with you. It makes sense because Live at the BBC was live at the BBC, so they would play it like they would do it live. There's no overdubs there. There's no multiple tracks there. Brian just playing guitar on one track, which is so different from the studio versions, right? Freddie does play with the lyrics a little bit more in there, and he finds a little more time to play with the melody here, going up on some notes, going down on some notes, adding some here and there. I feel like John's bass work might be more prominent during this version than any of the other ones so far. He adds a little bit during the Freddie descending vocal part that Brian plays along to. He adds a bass playing along to that too, which thickens it out the sound a little bit. Band does play a lot looser than they have usually, but they never lose control. Freddie has some great vocals, and it ends quite fun. It's a great live track to play. It kind of feels like it moves very live. The band gets to show themselves off a little bit. The audience can kind of dance along to it a little bit. It's a good bluesy rock track. I do appreciate that version. It's nice to see. Let's see if anything's changed between then, March of 1974, and a year and a half later at the Hammersmith Odeon, where they play See What a Fool I've Been at their Christmas concert. Let's go from there.
We'd like to leave you now with a number called See What a Fool I've Been.
And there it is, the Hammersmith 1975, very similar to the Rainbow 1974. It all depends really basically on personal preference at this point. I do think the mix is a little bit rougher compared to the Rainbow, so I probably prefer the Rainbow. And considering the BBC session is much more clear, I probably prefer that as well. There's some slight different vocals from Freddie here. He does play along a little bit differently again, as he does with the Rainbow and with the BBC. Roger does seem a bit more adventurous. It doesn't feel quite as fresh or as exciting as the March 1974 one does to me, so I have to label that. But it is still a very good track, very good version. The Hammersmith concert is a very good concert, so I definitely get a hold of Rainbow and Hammersmith. You might as well get both of them. They're both wonderful gems. But as far as this program goes, that's it. That is the versions we're going to listen to, so it is time to rank them. I know sometimes I rate the song first, give a number, but it's kind of very different compared to depending on what version we're talking about. So let me rank the versions first. On the bottom, number 4, that's the non-album B-side version. I can't do the Freddie vocal like that. I much prefer the more straightforward bluesy rock version. If you like it, hey, more power to you. I hope you want to pick it and maybe put that in your own personal playlist. But for me, it's definitely going to be either the BBC, Rainbow, or Hammersmith version, the straightforward, more playful version of the track. With that being said, next up is Hammersmith 1975. I do like it. I do like it a lot. But if I'm going to pick a live version, it would be Rainbow March 74, if only for the mix. I do like the mix better on Rainbow March of 74. It does feel a little bit more vibrant there to me. But we're talking vibrant. That means that Rainbow March 74 is going to be second, because it's great, but it's not the BBC session from 2011 remix. It's a great version to listen to. It's probably the definitive version of the song for me, the crown jewel. It's got everything I want on it. It does have a playful Freddie. It has crisp Claire playing throughout. Even though the band is doing a sloppy, quote-unquote, sloppy blues song, it still feels like a Queen song. It feels like Queen really taking control of the bluesy rock genre for a little bit. It's great. It's a great version. Great song, great version. So, with that being said, let's put that rating up there, 1 to 11, because we always go up to 11 here on PLD Projects. For See What a Fool I've Been, I think I'm going to give it a 6, maybe a 6.5. I'll give it a 6. It's a 6. It's not anything new and exciting from Queen. It is them kind of aping some of the bluesy rock bands of the time. In fact, if you are a Led Zeppelin fan, something like that, you might get more out of the BBC version than maybe a Queen fan would, to be honest with you. It's a good song. It's a solid song of the time. I can see any one of those bands doing it. But at this time, for me, I gotta be honest, it's a fine song. That's it. It's a fine song. So we'll stick with a 6, which means it's definitely not going to be in my top 10. And there you have it, folks. That will end the Queen 2 and Queen 2 sessions properly. Next week, we're going to have something new for you, a little bit new. We're going to be doing a little bit of catch-up because I'm adding a little more to the show. We don't talk much about the live concerts except for specifically the official releases. So I think what I want to do at the end of every album is touch base with some of the live tours that they did. And we'll add some songs because there are officially released songs on the live albums that aren't on any official studio album. Mostly covers, things of that nature. So when a concert is released, even if it's released in 2016 or 17, if it was from a concert in 1974, it makes sense to talk about that song around the same time it was actually performed, where the performance is from. So we're going to pick some of those officially released songs and add them to the Ultimate playlist when they're supposed to be added. So we might be going back and putting some above, because I didn't do this for Queen 1, and I'm just going to start it with Queen 2. Jailhouse Rock will be the first one I talk about. The band has covered Jailhouse Rock quite a bit. And definitely the original, earliest version we have is from the 1973 tour. They did play it at a Golders Green Hippodrome. It was released on the On Air album, the BBC On Air album. So that will be a version we're going to add. But we're also going to talk about the tours. The Queen 1 tour, as it were, and the Queen 2 tour. We'll talk about the set list, the general set list, some things they may have played. Otherwise, I'm going to try to get some links for you. So you have a most complete picture, even if some of the things don't end up on the playlist. It should be at least a fun discussion. So we'll do that for every album. Next week we'll do Jailhouse Rock, like I said, and I'm going to cover Queen 1 and Queen 2. I'm going to try to do it by year as we go forward, and especially for the Queen albums, after every album I'll do an update on anything live that needs to be discussed. But that's next week. Thanks for sticking around this week. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Hit that thumbs up. Leave me comments. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you didn't like. Join me on patreon.com/PLD Projects. Join the lovely patrons such as Danielle Ramirez, Brendan Buckingham, Brandy Barker, Jeff Alterman, John Lastrina, Kelly W., and all of you who help me keep the lights on. I really appreciate you. Let us know what you feel, what you think, what we could do better here, what I could do better. What do you want to hear from me? I'm always liking to hear that. Check out some of my other podcasts as well on the same Spotify feed or on YouTube. I have Two Mediocre White Dudes, a movie podcast I do with PJ Campbell. We go through franchises entry by entry and do a deep dive review into them. And also Class Action with Richard Eric Jarvie and Maddie Gunner. We put up two things against each other, battle to see which one is victorious. They're both a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoy it. Until then, stay safe, everybody. Keep on rocking. God's